Hello and welcome to the Vibrant Health Show. I'm Dr. Shannyn Pearce, and today's topic is all about autoimmune disease. Now, there are so many different autoimmune conditions out there, over 80 at this point, which is crazy because it never used to be that much. And even scarier than that, it affects like 1 in 10 people. That's more than cancer and heart disease and all of these other diseases that we're so worried about, when in fact, autoimmune disease affects more. Even scarier than that, autoimmune disease by a factor of 10x affects more women than men. That is a topic that needs to be discussed, right? These women are getting autoimmune conditions, so many different ones: Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, even things like psoriasis are autoimmune conditions, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. There's so many of them, yet we as women are getting them 10 times more than men, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, when in fact, almost the research says anywhere between about 50 to 100 million people have an autoimmune disease, but far more in North America than anywhere else. Do you know that there's actually cultures that don't have autoimmune disease? They don't even have a word in their language that means autoimmune because it's not something that they deal with, which means clearly there's stuff going on in our modern environment that is making this such a prevalent thing, and especially in women. So today I'm going to teach you guys really what an autoimmune disease actually is, because we've been taught all wrong, what causes it, and then what are some simple steps you can do to start moving in the right direction to either prevent or even reverse autoimmune disease. And yes, I fully believe autoimmune disease is reversible if you catch it early enough. We're told medically that once you have it, you'll have it forever. You'll be on medications forever. And a big part of that is because they never actually address the cause, right? So I have two things I want to start with, because this has to be very clear before we move on. The first one being, medically in general, their whole goal is to find you a diagnosis, right? They want to find the word for the condition that you have. And then from there, they pretty much stop, right? So for example, you go in, you're not feeling good, you have all these issues going on, you're gaining weight, you're tired, your hair's falling out. And let's say they find out you have Hashimoto's, right? You have autoimmune thyroid. Well, from that point forward, you're tagged with Hashimoto's, and here's your medication for life, but there's really no other intervention, right? Oh, we found out what's wrong with you. You have Hashimoto's, you're going to have it forever. See you later, good luck. When that should be the starting part, right? In holistic healthcare, in functional medicine, integrative medicine, that's just the beginning. And in fact, I actually don't really care that much about what name they've given you, right? A lot of people can get very attached to the diagnosis, to the name, to the condition, when that has very little to do with what it's going to take to get better. You have to figure out what caused the process, regardless of what the named condition is. And when it comes to autoimmune disease, here's the crazy thing. There's 80 different ones out there, but they all have a very similar stack of potential causes. And that's what we're going to go over today. So no matter what the autoimmune disease is called, that's not the end goal. Now we have to find what caused it, remove the cause, and allow your body to heal. For some of you, that might be symptomatic relief. That might be better quality of life. But for some of you, it really could be full remission. I see it all the time working with people. When we find the right root cause, the body starts to figure out how to heal. So do not just get stuck in a diagnosis. If you've been told you have an autoimmune condition, the name of your condition is only step one. Now you figure out and you investigate what caused it so that you can reverse it or be able to live a fully functional, healthy life, even with that diagnosis. But unfortunately, medically, they just stop there and you're on medications for life, right? That is the last step of treatment, is just finding the right dose of cocktail medications and leaving you on them forever. That's a big problem because you still never dealt with the cause. Which is also why when it comes to autoimmune disease, unfortunately, the research shows if you have one autoimmune disease, the average person before the end of their life will end up with 3. And that's because, let's say you had Hashimoto's. It wasn't just your thyroid. It was whatever was going on in the body creating the problem in your thyroid. So even if you take thyroid medication, but you don't correct the cause, now let's say that same issue starts to affect your joints. You have rheumatoid arthritis. Now it starts to affect your spinal tissue. Now you have MS. These things continue to go. It affects your mucous membrane. So now you have Sjögren's. Because it wasn't just one tissue that was the problem. It's not your thyroid, it's not your myelination, it's not your joints, it's not your gut lining. It's whatever's making your immune system mad. We have to completely shift how we think of autoimmune conditions if you actually want to get results. So in order to not only get rid of one, but to make sure you don't end up with 2 or 3, you've got to get to that cause. Now, here's where I think the problems have started. Medically, their definition of an autoimmune condition, and tell me if, like, fill in the blanks. Every time I ask this, you guys always know the answer because we've been told it so many times. Fill in the blanks. An autoimmune condition is your body attacking what? Tell me what the answer to that is. Your body attacking itself, right? That's what we've been told. That's like the definition everyone tells you. Oh, it's just when your body starts to turn on itself, it starts attacking itself. Let me tell you right now, your body never accidentally attacks itself. One of the premises of holistic healthcare is that your body never makes a mistake. It doesn't just whack out one morning and decide, hey, I'm going to go ahead and attack this thyroid. That sounds like fun. Or, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to destroy some joints today. Like, that's a good idea. That doesn't happen. Your body does not do that to you. What it does is attack something. So the causes I'm going to share with you guys today are the things your body is attacking. It never just turns on itself. There is something inside your body, and again, we'll go through these causes, that has made your immune system mad, that has created a massive amount of inflammation. So now your immune system has had to respond to that by sending a war, right? It's sending an army to these areas to try and protect itself. And basically it's friendly fire, right? Like in the war of attacking the cause, your tissues, your body, your glands get in the way and they become destroyed, destructed, affected, whatever at the same time. But be very clear, your body didn't make a mistake and it didn't just wake up and decide to fight itself, which is why we have to find your triggers for autoimmune. That is the answer to autoimmune conditions. Find the triggers, find out what's making your body mad. And if you remove them, it is really cool to watch people get better, get healthier, their antibodies go away, or if not, go down at least. We see this over and over again. But you've got to find the cause. No matter what medication you take, if you don't figure out what started it in the first place, damage is going to continue to happen, right? So one of the things medically, the most obvious thing that they give somebody with an autoimmune condition, number one, is typically something very potent to reduce inflammation. Because we know at the root of almost all autoimmune disease, there is an inflammatory component. However, just shutting down the inflammation is also not the answer, because you can take a bunch of painkillers. Let's say you like break your arm and you really shouldn't be using it because it's broken. But if you take enough painkillers, you could still use it, right? You probably shouldn't, but physically you probably could still do it until they wear off and then the damage is still there. Medications work the same way. I understand that they might give you a little bit more function, and that's fine, right? If you're on them, I'm not saying don't be on them. I'm saying it's not the only way to make sure that your body is healing. So that's medically, find the name the disease, and then find enough medications to maybe give you a little bit of, comfort while you have this disease the rest of your life. Functional medicine, holistic medicine is no way. We don't accept that. We're going to find out what caused it. We're going to remove the triggers, and we're going to allow our body a chance to see if we can heal from this thing, because it is doable if you know the right places to look. So I hope that's helpful for some of you if you've been dealing with different autoimmune conditions. And now we got to get down to what really causes them. So in general, there are 2 main categories and 5 typical causes. So really it's kind of simple. But then from there, there's also like 100 subcategories. So that's where it gets a little bit complicated, and you might want some help navigating through this. But there are 2 main things that cause autoimmune conditions: an inflammatory response and an immune system aggravation. That's it, truly, those 2 things. If something caused inflammation or something caused irritation to your immune system, those are what cause autoimmune conditions, hands down, across the board, every single one. Try and bring me one single autoimmune condition that doesn't have one of those 2 things at the core. You won't find one. Those are what trigger it. Now, the thing that causes the inflammation and the immune activation, that's the other 5 causes, right? The 5 most typical things that start that process moving in the right direction. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit tricky. Number one, I've actually never met somebody with an autoimmune condition who only had one of these 5, right? Typically, by the time your immune system is so aggravated that it has waged this war, you've probably had 2 or 3 of these combined, right? I always say the layer effect is what gets you the biggest symptoms, right? The more of these things that are happening in your internal environment, the more your body's going to react and respond. So typically there's more than one, which is why it's so important to investigate, get some testing, try different food eliminations. Like, you need to figure out for your body what that combination is, because it's different for everybody. In fact, you can bring me 10 people who have rheumatoid arthritis, and we're going to find 10 different combinations of root causes. You're not going to have the exact same thing as someone else, but the core of these 5 are always somewhere in the mix of that. So let's go through the core 5 things that cause the inflammation and the immune system activation that are the things that start and perpetuate autoimmune disease. Number 1, and I'm going in order of what I really believe is the importance of, like, this is probably your root cause. Number 1 is infections. And there's some really well documented, and here's the thing, sometimes they'll say, well, there's not research to back that up. Yeah, there's a lot of research, medical research, journal articles to back up all of this. It's just inconvenient for medicine to change their entire approach when there's a lot of wonderful documentation that this is factual. And there are 3 infections that typically are connected with autoimmune disease. So when we talk infection, we're talking about chronic infections, things that your body has to deal with on a daily basis. That'll cause inflammation. That'll cause your immune system to be mad. Think about it like if you have kids. If you have to consistently, like, get on your kid about the same thing every day, discipline them about the same thing every day, you start to get irritated. You start to get, like, activated, right? You all of a sudden aren't so nice about telling them to pick up their socks again. You get irritated. You raise your voice. You try more ways to try and get them to listen. Your immune system's doing the same thing. If you have had a chronic infection and it's dealt with it over and over, and it did it nicely at first, it tried to, ramp things up a little bit, and you're still not listening and it's still not going away, it's going to start throwing a bunch of antibodies at the problem, because that's all it knows how to do, right? That is the best step in that situation. And when there's an explosion of antibodies, we call that a autoimmune disease, right? So start putting those pieces together. The 3 most common, and there are so many more, but the 3 most common infections that have been linked through research to autoimmune disease, number 1, and the one I believe is probably the most common for majority of you guys out there who have an autoimmune disease, is a chronic Epstein-Barr virus. I talk about Epstein-Barr virus so much, not only because it was my root cause, it was what activated my immune system triggers, but I find it over and over and over again in women who have complicated situations. If you are the woman who feels like nothing's worked for you, you've seen 10 other doctors, nothing's getting better, you're on the medications and they're not working, a chronic infection, and likely a chronic Epstein-Barr infection, could be at the root. Now, Epstein-Barr has been linked scientifically, research, doing biopsies and cultures, to being the number 1 cause of Hashimoto's and Graves'. It is linked to the development of MS, multiple sclerosis. It's been linked to Crohn's disease, several different autoimmune conditions, and I believe much more, but those are the ones that have actually been research linked and looked at. So we know Epstein-Barr, just by nature of the way it gets in the cells and replicates, triggers that immune activation, which can become an autoimmune disease. So let's take back for a second what I said about your body isn't attacking itself. It's attacking something, an abnormal foreign invader. Let's go back to that example of Hashimoto's. Wouldn't it make more sense than just saying, I woke up and my body attacked my thyroid and that sucks, I'm going to have it forever, woe is me, this is going to be medications for life, versus thinking, okay, what if I have an Epstein-Barr infection? What if this infection is in my bloodstream? And the thyroid is the place that gets the most blood flow of almost the entire body, which is why Graves' disease and Hashimoto's are so prevalent, why there's so many people have them, because that's a gland that's really easy to get stuff into because of the amount of blood flow that passes through the thyroid. So let's imagine you have a chronic Epstein-Barr infection. In the bloodstream, it circulates to the thyroid. The thyroid is this warm, squishy tissue where infections love to live. That's like the perfect environment for a virus to want to just like cozy up in there, get in the cells and live there forever. So now you have these Epstein-Barr viral cells inside your thyroid. Your immune system says, wait a minute, there's a virus in here. That's not good, right? We don't want a virus inside the thyroid. What do we do about it? Okay, we're going to fight it, right? That's your immune system's job. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's fighting it, but it doesn't quite have enough power to kill it all the way off. So it fights it harder. So it fights it harder. So it makes more and more and more antibodies to fight off the Epstein-Barr virus that's inside your thyroid. And because it had to do it so forcefully, yeah, now your thyroid is impacted, right? It can cause cell damage. It can cause destruction to the tissue, but not because your thyroid was the problem, because your body had to fight off this Epstein-Barr virus that most of you don't even know is there because no one bothered to test you for it. Doesn't that make more sense? Like, my body's fighting something, it's not fighting itself. So infections with autoimmune are absolutely the first place that I look. Epstein-Barr being number one. Number two is a specific parasite. Now, all parasites can, but the one that has been the most researched is called Blastocystis hominis. It is a parasite that we can get from food, water, contact. It's really easily transmitted. And if your body doesn't fight it off properly, it gets embedded in the gut, in the cells, in the liver, and has also been linked to Hashimoto's, to MS, to Crohn's disease, because same deal. Your body says, whoa, we have a parasite stuck in here. What do we do about it? It has to continually activate over and over and over again to fight it off because you don't know it's there. So you're not giving your body stuff to help get rid of it. So your immune system is left on its own to fight harder, to do more, to make more antibodies. Now you've been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when the root cause was really a parasite, not your body turning on itself. Are you guys following me with this? Is this making sense to you? Does it make more sense that, oh, wait a minute, my body is doing something right? We might not like what it's doing, right? We don't love that we have an autoimmune disease, but it's doing its job. Now that we know that, we can help it do it better, take the pressure off of your immune system, and it knows how to heal. It knows how to go back to homeostasis. So Epstein-Barr and Blastocystis hominis are two of the most commonly researched ones when it comes to autoimmune disease. And then the third one, I'm going to kind of lump together. I see more often a large yeast overgrowth. I know there's so much like SIBO and bacterial overgrowth is like a big topic right now. And not that those aren't relevant and they are important to fix, but typically I find those things happen because you've had other chronic infections and your body has just allowed the bacteria to become imbalanced. It's still important, but typically it's never just that. There's usually these other bigger infections with it. And the third one for me is really large yeast overgrowth. When there is a giant overgrowth of yeast, yeast is tricky. It gets everywhere. And just like that Epstein-Barr virus, it loves the warm, squishy tissue, which is why yeast gets in the thyroid. Yeast gets in the adrenal glands. It gets all gunked up inside the liver. All of these places that help our immune function, if they're bombarded with a major yeast overgrowth, yeah, your body's going to have to fight it off, right? It's going to have to make more antibodies. So typically those are the first three places I start looking for people. What's going on with Epstein-Barr virus? What's going on with overgrowth and infections in the gut? Because the microbiome and your gut health has been linked time and time again to autoimmunity and just the general health of your immune system anyways. So looking at those, Epstein-Barr virus is a blood draw, where the other ones would be found in a stool sample, but investigating those causes, especially if you have an autoimmune condition and you've never been checked for those chronic infections that are linked, highly linked to autoimmune disease, we got to start there. You don't know your root cause, right? You haven't found your answer yet. Checking for those chronic infections is a huge piece of the puzzle and the one that moves the marker the quickest. You get rid of some of those infections, all of a sudden your immune system really starts to do some cool stuff on its own. That would be priority number one. Number two, we're going to look at, in order of priority, we talked about it a little bit, but the gut microbiome in general, but more in terms of inflammation, right? So anything that's causing inflammation in the body. Now, some of this is environmental, right? If you live a toxic lifestyle, if you eat inflammatory foods, if you are doing things that are causing inflammation in the body all the time, the immune system is going to have to respond to that. And that same inflammation tends to be the cause of leaky gut. Now, why leaky gut, I took that differently than just the infections, is because there doesn't always have to be an infection for you to have leaky gut. But what happens, and I did a whole video on leaky gut a couple weeks back, so if you're unclear about what leaky gut is, I have an entire teaching on that. But to boil it down in the simplest terms, what leaky gut is when there's inflammation in the body, it actually causes, we have tight junctions that are supposed to keep our gut nice and sealed so that pathogens, microbes, foods, all these things just pass through the digestive tract and are eliminated, but don't get in the bloodstream. When we have inflammation, primarily causing leaky gut, we get gaps in those junctions. which means all the stuff that's in our digestive system can actually pass through to the bloodstream where it's not supposed to be. So when these things are in the bloodstream, toxins, food, bacteria, microbes, anything that was supposed to stay in the gut now gets in the bloodstream, your immune system says, wait a minute, these aren't supposed to be in the bloodstream. What do I do about this? And then it attacks it, right? By attacking it, it forms antibodies. Antibodies at a high level, you get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Do you see how these are connected, right? If you have an antibody release, if your body is releasing antibodies, it's because your immune system's fighting something. Chronic infections, leaky gut, allowing all of these toxins to get into the bloodstream, causing systemic inflammation. Those are the two biggest things that I believe are not addressed very well at all in the traditional way of taking care of autoimmune disease. So starting with those two would be huge. Number 3 is food, right? All foods, right? Making sure you're doing a low inflammatory diet, but there is one in particular, again, linked over and over and over again to not only the cause of autoimmune, but also making it worse, and that's gluten. If you have not gone gluten-free yet, that's your first step, right? That's the first thing you need to do. Today, immediately, you're going to say, I'm done with gluten. Let's see if just that alone can help reduce some of my symptoms. The research shows that 55% of people who have an autoimmune disease who eliminate gluten see significant reduction in their symptoms. That's actually more effective than the immune modulating medications they put you on, because those have less than a 50% chance that it's going to reduce your symptoms. So the medication is less than 50. Just eliminating gluten is a more than 50% chance that you're going to get symptom relief. Doesn't that seem like something you should try, even if you're on the medications? Like, even the data, the numbers show this makes a difference, because gluten is tied to leaky gut. It's tied to inflammation. It has toxins that your body can't process. I believe everybody should be gluten-free, but at bare minimum, if you have an autoimmune disease and you have not gone gluten-free yet, you start there, right? And if it's overwhelming to make all the food changes and you don't want to do these big AIP elimination diets, fine. Just start with gluten. Just see what happens there, because 55% of people say it made a pretty big difference just minimizing gluten. And that's a pretty simple and totally free first thing that you can start with. So yes, minimizing inflammatory foods, but most importantly, making sure that we are minimizing and eliminating gluten. That's number 3. Number 4 is a little bit more complicated, right? Because it takes you some work to kind of dive into this, but stress and trauma. In fact, a lot of autoimmune, the onset of an autoimmune condition, can be tied back to a traumatic event pretty soon after, right? Within the next 2 years after a traumatic event, we're seeing a lot more elevation in antibodies, because that stress response, that trauma response, your immune system went on high alert, and it just kind of weakens your body's ability to self-manage. And that's when a lot of these diseases and conditions come up. So just making sure you have a good daily stress management practice. If you have traumatic events, you're getting help for it, right? Have someone to talk to, seek help out. Don't hold all these things in, because an unprocessed traumatic event has been linked to several different chronic illnesses, but autoimmune disease for sure. So if you know that's happened, right? If you've had a really traumatic couple of years, if you've had a stressful childhood, any of those things are directly linked to your physical health, even though it's that emotional component. So a daily stress management routine. I have tons of suggestions in these videos. If you just type in stress management routine, you'll find lots of different things that you can implement immediately. And then especially if you have some traumas and things that are unresolved, finding help to be able to resolve those makes such a big difference. So don't forget about that stress trauma piece. Just as important as infections, leaky gut, inflammation, gluten, all of those go hand in hand. And then lastly, number 5, right? So we have infections, we have leaky gut and inflammation, we have gluten, we have, well, food, but gluten in particular, we have stress and trauma. And then lastly, we have toxicity. The reason I put this lower on the list is, let's say we do find that you have heavy metals, or you have mold toxicity, or you have some of these bigger like leads and cadmium, whatever things we might find. Typically, it can't be the first thing that we address, because your body's not healthy enough to go through a full mold detox or to go and chelate heavy metals. That's a pretty intense process. In fact, I never detox a body that still has infections, that still has leaky gut, that still has, like, those things have to be addressed first. And then you're able to go in and do a really good cellular detox, get rid of some of these other things that are absolutely triggers and causes of autoimmune. But when we find more than one root cause, the order of how it's addressed is truly the difference between it working for you or it not. If you just try and start day one with a big mold detox, you're going to feel terrible. You're going to mobilize a bunch of toxins. Your body doesn't know how to deal with those yet. You're going to end up feeling worse. In fact, you can actually cause more issues by starting with a really forceful detox. We always want to make sure the immune system and the inflammation is as calm as we can get it. We really want to support the adrenal glands and make sure the body is ready for a detox. And then when you get to the point that it is that time, yes, addressing mold, heavy metals, toxins, environmental toxins, all of those things is crucial, but it's never the first place I start, even though it is a well-documented trigger for autoimmune, just not step one. That can go very badly for a lot of people. So the order is what I've become really well known for, is creating the right order for a woman to heal so that we're actually getting long-term results, but not overstressing the body and creating more problems, going more systematically and a little bit slower to make sure each of those problems is addressed specifically and not just trying to throw 15 supplements at you and hoping your body understands what to do. The order of the process is really make or break, especially for a woman who's already sensitive, already has autoimmune disease, probably has some adrenal issues going on. The intentionality behind what you work on first, which is why I gave you the order in exactly how I would address that. Now, I would say if you're looking for somewhere to start, you want to start somewhere today. Number one is cut out gluten. If you have not done that yet, you are cutting out gluten. Number two, get some proper testing. For autoimmune disease, a stool sample would be number one, and then a blood draw for Epstein-Barr. I'll put links in the comments to all of this so you guys can go look how to order those tests, ask questions about them. But that would be huge. If you are looking for that next step, you've had autoimmune, you're not getting results, and you've never been checked for chronic infections, that I can't stress enough how that is the most important next step. Go and get some good testing. I'll put the links down here, have someone evaluate them who understands what they're looking at and lets you know exactly what would be the first thing to start dealing with each of those. But a stool sample and then a blood draw for Epstein-Barr would be the two tests I would recommend you starting with for Epstein-Barr. And then there's other things you can always add as you go, right? But we always want to start with step one. That is step one. A good stress management routine. Remember, these are action steps to take now. You're cutting out gluten, you're getting some good testing, you're starting a good stress management routine in the morning if you don't have one. Your mindset and your mental stress will flare. You know this, if you have an autoimmune disease, when you're extra stressed, do you feel better or worse? You feel way worse, right? You know it impacts you. Let's get ahead of that a little bit, right? Let's keep our nervous system calm. Let's have a good stress management routine. Again, go back and look at some of the videos of the ones I've provided for you guys. There's so many, but that's such an easy, simple thing to add right away that makes a big difference. And then lastly, knowing that inflammation and immune system are the two things that trigger most of your autoimmune symptoms, adding in some really good immune system support right off the bat. Through the holidays, I actually have an immune system bundle that I've created because in the winter, everyone's getting sick, but it's actually the exact same bundle I would use for autoimmune because it has some great, gentle, adaptogenic immune support. It has monolaurin that has antiviral, antibacterial, antiparasitic properties in it, so it can at least help minimize some of those infections while you're looking for the true root causes. And then it has the best version of vitamin D, which has also been, I mean, there's so many scientific literature papers on the importance of having a good vitamin D level when you have autoimmune disease, which again, I have a whole video on the importance of vitamin D, beautiful things it does, the right dosing for you. But if you have an autoimmune disease, typically 5,000 IUs per day with K1 and K2, both of them, K1 and K2. Most vitamin Ds only have K2, but for autoimmune, you really want to make sure both are in there. So in the immune bundle, I've added a D that has both K1 and K2, plus the immune system support, plus the monolaurin to help reduce any pathogens. And for some of you, just adding that and cutting out gluten could have some very significant movements in the right direction, which is exciting if you've been someone who feels like you've been stuck with your symptoms for a very long time. I think those are easy, simple, very doable things to start with as you continue to investigate more root causes, find more answers. But starting somewhere is better than doing nothing. So cutting out gluten, adding the immune bundle, checking those infections. I cannot stress that enough. If you haven't checked infections, you've not even began to look for your root causes for autoimmune. and then start your stress management practice. I mean, these are foundational, right? These are the things that daily you should be doing just to be a healthy, happy person that you can start implementing right away. So I hope that helps somebody out there. One, clarify the whole autoimmune mystery. Truly, I don't believe it's a mystery, right? Medically, it's this weird, like, we don't know why the body does it. Holistically, we know exactly why the body does it. It's just our job with each individual case to be the investigator and find out what your triggers are, how many you have, what's the combination, the blend of your triggers. But if you find the triggers, I fully believe the body can heal. So keep investigating, never give up, keep looking for your answers. And if you have questions, just drop them below and I'll come back and answer those. But thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Hope that was helpful, and I'll see you back next week.